Oh, you're on mute, buddy.
Oh, I'm on mute. I'm an idiot. MANGONE here. Welcome to the Run Pure Sports Sabersim show. We are here. It's not AP. It's me, MANGONE, here with Jordan to break it all down. AP did not want to come on and try to talk about all these NHL names. Frederik Andersen, Linus Ullmark. I mean, it's definitely difficult. Sergei Bobrovsky. I mean, we've got it here. We'll definitely break it all down for you. Talking some NHL for today. And not just today. Let's say you are a DFS fan and you are, new to NHL. Feel like we can definitely help you out here and really give you some advice on things. I know Jordan's got some really cool stuff to show us in Sabersim. So, Jordan, how is it going over there? And what are we talking about today?
Yeah, no, it's going good. Biggest week of the NHL DFS season, as I always say here, heading into the NBA All-Star break. Tend to get some pretty nice contests, some bigger contests here this week. I know it's always a week where people like to dip their toes into the NHL streets. Check it out if they haven't been playing that all season. For the NHL grinders out there, it's always a fun week because you do get those bigger prize pools, those bigger contests. Sometimes a little softer money showing up into those as well. So, yeah, figured we'd come on, talk a little puck today. And break it down and get into it here.
Yeah, I definitely like talking pucks. It'll be a lot of fun. I wish NHL was like going on in the summer. I'd have more interest then. That would be my thing. But NBA takes a lot of time and effort. So, kind of put my time there. But sometimes I dabble in the NHL streets, and I'm excited to break it down with you today and talk about it. But what are some of the stuff in the Sims you want to kind of discuss, I guess? Let's kind of dive in there, because I know there's some newer stuff that you wanted to mention and just things in NHL. Like, listen, I use Sabersim when I run my NHL stuff, and I don't know, maybe you'll teach me something that I have no idea about that could help in my process going forward.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I think it's a sport where the Sabersim model is actually set up to do really well, just because it's a very high variance sport and it's a high correlation sport. I know a lot of times you hear hockey DFS get compared a little bit to baseball in that way, where average projections aren't as reliable. Guys are very highly correlated with each other. There's a wide range of outcomes. Those kinds of sports, it's just a really good spot to use simulations. And the main reason why,
Jordan, wasn't this opto like built for baseball, right? So like the case you can make for that too is like it's got such great similarities. Like you could argue that Saber, because it was built off the baseball, and obviously you build it for every different sport, you try to make it perfect it in every single way. NHL correlates pretty well then, probably NFL, I would assume.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Any of those sports where, ranges of outcomes are high and the correlations are high, it's just going to be a situation where you're just at such a strong advantage from using Sims, just because we can handle and process that information of the range of outcomes and correlations of players here. And you can see that if we pull up a guy like Pasternak here, right, projected for 15.22, you can see there's actually like even just a wide range of likely outcomes here, and then a huge tail of ceiling outcomes here. This actually does look quite a bit like, something like an NFL wide receivers distribution chart or something like that. And these correlations too, right? I think one thing that's very unique about hockey in particular is it's mostly line correlation, right? Power play and even strength line correlation for these guys. Not so much necessarily same team correlation, but same line correlation. And that's something that the Sims pick up really well. So Pasternak, very highly correlated to other skaters that skate on his even strength and power play lines here. All of this data ends up being taken into account when you build lineups right out of the get-go here. So there are a lot of tools here that we can use, and we'll walk through that today to dial in like how you might go about setting up stacks and things like that. But just when you actually build lineups for the first time, we're taking into account that diversity, those ranges of outcomes from the Sims. We're building lineups that use our correlations from those Sims. You get very competitive and playable lineups right out of the gate with hockey, just based on the Sims alone. So a really good sport to just like check out, especially this week while NFL and NBA's off, because the builder does a really good job of building lineups.
Yep, for sure. Before we dive in, guys, please hit that like, subscribe to the channel. It helps us out a ton over here at Run Pure Sports. We appreciate it. Jordan, pull that back up where it says the build lineups. Like we can go through real quick. Go through the 20 max, the 150, and show how like the sliders move. Right? Some people might not know this, but as you kind of switch through the sliders, it's going to change the correlation, going to change the ownership fade based on the way that you pick the entrance. So there's tons of ways to mess with that. And I'll admit there's some slates where I don't know. Sometimes I just want like a slightly different look. And I might move the ownership fade up, right? And then sometimes I might see that, hey, listen, these players are being pounded in the lineups, even though they're pretty chalky. And maybe that's a reason to play them and find a way to make it different. Maybe I'm playing line 2 instead of line 1 of that chalk stack. Maybe I make sure to get different with my goalie or in my mini stack. So these are things that I look at when I kind of break it all down. Before we kind of go to my process, though, where's some other stuff that you want to show the people here?
Yeah, so I think probably the most important thing, just so people understand where it is basically how to set up a good stacking rule for NHL. Again, the correlations are going to do a really good job of just building you good stacks right out of the gate. But I know in hockey in particular, people often, they're looking for a particular stack in 100% of their lineups, right? Maybe you're stacking power play 1. You want that, especially 8-game slate tonight, right? You just want to make sure that correlation's in there. That's going to be in the lineup rules section over here. So
Jordan, this is probably great for me because when you see my process, you're going to be like, you moron, like the things that I go through, like I'm like digging through trash to find out my stuff. So this is already a great, valuable thing that I'm going to enjoy.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. And I know, so I mean, like there's other places to set stacking rules in the app here and choose things, but these are all kind of, to be totally honest, they've been set up mostly for other sports where you're really just trying to stack a team as a whole. With the line stacking in hockey, it's a little bit different here. So we'll add a new rule, and then we'll set it as a stacking rule. And this is where you have a lot of that control over your line. So let's just use the example that I was using before and saying that we want, I know power play, 4 guys on power play 1, pretty common stacking rule that people might want to use here, must be on the same power play line. And then we can actually go through here. We don't even really need to touch the EV ones here, but we can just make sure that that's power play 1. So this rule, if we were to build now, we save this rule. This is going to make sure 4 guys from power play 1 in every single lineup. And that could be different power play lines from different teams and things like that. But it's always PP1, 4 guys, just as a starting point for your.
Okay, and that naturally eliminates some players from your like even pool, like without even having to take them out yourself, which is perfectly fine. And sometimes you might not get exposure to someone because of it. So just be aware of that. That's one thing to note as well when kind of setting that type of rule. For me, sometimes I can strain the opto too much. So I stay away from that. What would be a way for me to like, can I make it where it's line 1 and line 2 kind of instead?
Yeah. So, I mean, here's another. So this is a pretty rigid rule. So we could get more flexible and say at least 4, but the guys can either be on the same even strength or power play line. And we'll also let like even strength lines 1, 2, and 3 in there.
Yeah.
This would be.
I like that a lot because what that does is because sometimes there's guys that like they could be a good value that they're on like line 2 and 1. And sometimes like, I don't mind, like, let's say I really like Vancouver tonight. Right. Mm-hmm. Well, sometimes like, and again, I don't know the players that well, but like if there's 2 guys on Vancouver line 1 and they're on power play 1, there's 2 guys on Vancouver line 2, and they're also on power play 1 as well. I'm getting exposure to line 1 and line 2, where if an assistant goal happens between the 2 of them on that line on full strength, that's great. And then I also can get them on the power play. So I feel like I have exposure more to the game than just one full line. So that's one thing that I definitely don't mind doing, where this helps allow that rule, especially if there's some lines. Like I think Washington's a great example. I remember one slate, it's like power play 1 had like guy on line 1, guy on line 2, and 3, and gave me the ability to kind of do that. And then I also think one thing I noticed on that exact slate was all the Washington stacks were doing that. So one thing I wouldn't have minded doing here is eliminating that line 3 guy, which I could have manually done. But if I got rid of that where it didn't mix in those line 3 guys here and there, because if it has one line 3 guy that's on power play 1, sometimes it would mix in his line 3 option as well. And I didn't love that look. So this actually gives you kind of a great way to have control over some of the like best players from line 1s and 2 only.
Yeah, and you can get even more detailed here if you want to keep going down that path. Maybe you have a different line rule that you want for different teams, right? Like maybe you're taking a shot on some teams that are, an underdog in the game and their implied total isn't very high, but you still want some like power play 1 stacks in there just in case they do end up having that upside outcome. You can change the teams here that the rules correspond to. So, if you want more flexible, kind of wide open rules for the teams that are projected to score a little bit more, and then a more narrow rule for, I do want a little bit of like maybe some Montreal, like, power play 1 type stacks. You can build in separate stacking rules here and get them in that way. So
yeah, and there could be a team that you're like, man, like I'm not getting exposure to, and I think it's because I'm putting constraints on these rules. I love the teams I'm getting, and I love how it's eliminating some of those other players that I don't want in, and you don't have to manually go in and click them all out. But this could be a great way to do that and still be able to get exposure to those other lines by getting rid of those teams.
Yep, absolutely. I'm going to go ahead and save this rule here. I think it's like a good baseline one. We can go ahead and use it and just see what the results of the build look like there. Another thing I know people do like to do here is to just, be a little bit cautious with these fourth line guys. They'll pop into your builds from time to time, especially with a ownership fade that's a little high or a sim diversity that's a little bit higher here. One thing that I will sometimes do is just go and clean up this pool a little bit, remove some of these guys skating on the fourth line, especially if they're not also on power play one. Big slate tonight. We don't need to go through and do all this, but that is something in my process I do typically do a little bit of here. I think everything down to that third line is pretty viable. I think time on ice, even line 1 to line 3, a lot of times is close enough that I want some of these lower salary line 3 guys in here. But that fourth line, I just think that the upside's not always there. So I will sometimes go through and do a little bit of cleanup there on those guys. Basically, everyone line 4, not skating on power play 1. I'll do a little bit of cleanup there.
Yeah, I don't think that's a bad idea. I'll admit I don't do that, but what I do sometimes when I typically don't MME. I typically hand build for NHL, or not hand build, but I hand pick a team. And again, it's a lot of sifting through the mud and trying to figure out, hey, which team do I like here? And sometimes I see like, if they just got a 2,500 line guy, I don't typically like it. But one thing I don't mind with that is sometimes I like to see, is that like forcing that guy in because like it wants to get an Ovechkin, right? Like different things like that are totally unique. And then what I'll try to do is maybe I'll tinker down, like let's say it gets me that 4-man stack, and I notice a trend of, well, if you play this Washington 4-man stack, you have to really just punt your 2,500 guy. What I'll do sometimes is maybe I'll change like this, like the little skinny stack, right? If it's like a 4-2-1, I'll change the 2-man stack in order to give myself the ability to grab one of them, or maybe if in that team it has a goalie that's like 8,200, maybe I'll switch that goalie to a 7,500 goalie and then move my 2,500 guy to a 3,200 option, see what's there and available. So those are things that I'll manually tinker sometimes. And I want to let the opto do its work, but I do think it's a little thing to look at here and there that I don't mind doing in NHL, but that's just a small thing that I mess around with.
Yeah, no, I think that makes perfect sense. I think we should get some lineups built here, and we can show off that lineup editor as well there a little bit. So let's pull the build settings back up here. So I think, as a good starting point, makes a lot of sense here to just use the defaults for like a typical contest here. I will just make a couple notes on the sliders here overall. So one thing, ownership fade slider, it's at 3, listed at moderate here for this 20 max 10 to 50K. I think if I was going to touch any of these sliders, I do experiment sometimes with bringing this ownership fade slider down. What I've just noticed just playing a little bit of hockey DFS here is that because you're using sims when you build lineups with Sabersim, your sim diversity is really high. A lot of times you don't really actually need this ownership fade slider to be very high to get good contrarian plays and some lower owned plays in each lineup here. So I think first build, we'll just leave it at that default value. But one thing, if you're going to look at the sliders a little bit, or if you're running builds and they do look like very contrarian, experiment with bringing this down. There's actually slates sometimes where I have this off completely. And I'm basically just kind of rolling with what the sims say, getting some contrarian plays in there automatically and not really even having to worry directly about ownership like that.
Yeah, that's interesting because I have messed around with that at times, and I've been like, I want to, like, sometimes I run them, and I run the 20 max, I run the 3, the single, I run every single one to see what the top stacks are. That's what I do in my process. And then sometimes I see myself just getting the same ones, and I'm like, I want to just see something different, right? Like, I don't like what I'm seeing. So I will try and tinker with that. And I have learned at times when I move it up, sometimes it like gives me stuff I don't even like. And then I'm like, okay, like I understand whatever it's giving me now I should keep. And then sometimes I've looked at it and just been like, I like that it's spitting out some different stuff, but I don't know if I trust this, right? Where I'll be like, oh, I really do like this. And that's my way to get off of some of that chalk, and it's not too crazy. But I do mess around with the slider. It's good to hear you say that sometimes it's good to just run it with just the sims only. So yeah, that's something I'll maybe mess around with next time I'm in that spot. Because again, I don't want to put my own, like, I'm not sitting here hand building my lineups, but when I look at the stack, sometimes I try to look at ownership and see what everyone's on. And I typically treat it like baseball, where I'm like, okay, the most popular stack on like a big slate, which in 8 gamers big enough where I'll be like, I kind of want to get away from the most popular stack. At least that's me personally. So if it just only, like, let's say I run all 4 settings and I only get the most popular stack as the one, and I'm not liking the other looks that I'm getting, I will mess around with that slider in different ways to try and see what I can do.
And I think that makes a ton of sense, right? And just experiment with it. I think on some slates, we're going to be a little bit more in line with what the chalk is, and you're going to need a little bit more ownership fade. Others, we won't. So it really just depends. It depends a little bit on the payout structure of the contest, too. I know sometimes that flagship NHL contest on DraftKings is like $50K to first and $10K to second. You got to get different in a contest like that, right? I mean, you're competing with 15,000, 20,000 other lineups. All that equity's up in first place. You got to do something a little different there. So a couple other notes here real quickly before we actually just get this build going. I'm going to bump my pool size up to 1,500. That's the max. Might as well have those lineups in the pool for us to mess around with. The one other thing, I know this is, not something that's huge in my process, but I do know that there's a lot of people out there that don't like that defenseman in the utility spot. You can just uncheck that if you want to remove that there. I typically like to leave them in there. There's some higher upside defensemen in there. It gives you a little bit more of a unique construction. I'm curious your thoughts on this one, Mango. Are you a fan of the D in utility, or is that something you uncheck?
I'm not typically.
Okay.
It has to be if it's a shorter slate and there's like premier defenders, right? Because if it's like a 3-gamer and like there's just like a premier defender that can win it for you at the position, I understand that. But on these bigger slates, I typically love to find like give me a 3K defender that's like on like line like 2 and like power play 1 if I can. Like I don't force it, but those are things that I definitely do look for. I'm like trying to find that cheap defender, no doubt. Like it's kind of like outfield for me in baseball. Like there's so many of them. I feel like I can like sometimes catch a pretty nice cheap defender, but it always depends on the slate.
Yeah. So we unchecked it for this build. I'm good with that. I got no problems with that. I've experimented with that a little bit as well here. So we'll start looking at some lineups here, see what the build's coming up with. One thing I like to check right off the bat, just to give us an idea of kind of where we're at, stack types, right? See what we're getting. You can look at the pool as well. I think that can be useful as well here. A lot of 4-2s, a lot of 4-3s, a couple 4s with no like mini stack on the side, and then some bigger stacks as well. I know sometimes this is something that scares people off a little bit, trying to avoid a situation where you're like full stacking a team. This is something where we could eliminate these from our pool if we wanted. You can also go back and change that stack rule a little bit here to say like exactly 4 instead of we said at least 4. So you could say exactly 4 and limit those larger stacks coming through. I don't hate these. I don't hate the idea of playing like an onslaught kind of build where you're getting 5-2s. I don't know if I'd go all the way to a 6, but this is kind of the first thing I tend to look for here when I'm running my builds.
Yeah, can you move it just because I like this more? Can you move it from 20 lineups to 100? Can you add like more to the like? I understand we can look at the whole pool. I don't know if it's for me, but like when it's actually like whitened out and not just grayed out, it's easier for me to like decipher and see. I don't know. For me, visually, I like it a little bit more. But it's interesting. The 5-2s do pop up more than some. Like typically, I notice 4-2 is like the one I go to the most, and it's typically 4-2-1. But like I said, I run all 3 settings. I typically run like the 20 max, the 150, the 6. I run every single one. I try to give different looks with it too, to see which one pops up the most. And then that kind of helps me make the decision. Like that's the one I want to kind of look at, I guess you could say. Like I said, I typically lean with the 4 stack. What are the team stacks? Let's look to see what teams are actually showing up. All right, so it's a huge Calgary day right now. I'm assuming it's because they're playing Detroit. Detroit's not a good, I was gonna say basketball team because I'm in basketball mode, but they're a hockey team. So yeah, Detroit definitely not good at sports in general. But yeah. Calgary's definitely going to be a team that pops up and is going to be pretty popular. Carolina then pops up as the second one. I also think the Calgary prices look good. That's another thing, especially for like line 1 players, right? Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I was going to go check here. One thing that you can kind of do to see that here is just look at the values and just see, point per dollar who's popping. And we do see, Calgary showing up here a little bit. Seattle actually shows up quite a bit here as well. I'm curious how much we're getting of them. Yeah, so our 5th most popular stack.
So can we do this? Can you go back and can you take that setting off just because I think the setting that's like go back to the homepage real quick.
Yeah.
So take the setting off the line 1 and line 2 just because I do think they're very good plays, Calgary, but I think you're getting an aggressive amount of them because of how good of values they are for the settings we set because there's so many good value pieces that are on like the line 1 and 2. And I'm not saying we can't play them because of that, but I want to see if we get a ton of Calgary still, because if we do get a ton of Calgary still, that's going to be very telling with how good I think they are in general.
Yeah, no, that's a sharp point. And you should be aware of that, right? When you're setting rules and telling the builder, hey, include these lines from this, like every stack must have players on skating on these lines. Sometimes you will get some things that are popping in there just because of the way that it fits with salary, that kind of thing. So, I mean, still a lot of Calgary popping up here.
I figured that's the case. Is it still four mans, or is it 4 mans or 5 mans? Wow, it's still 5 mans. Okay, that's intriguing to me. I didn't realize it would be that aggressive on it because, again, I typically see 4 mans pop up more, but I think it's interesting that Calgary's popping that much here.
Yeah, and I mean, it looks like it's like literally the entire power play one line here jumping.
There's such good values, and like they're all correlated really well. That's why. Not to say, like, I mean, you like, and then one thing I go and do here sometimes is like I'll go back and I'll literally X Calgary and then see what it does from there to see like, well, what other looks am I getting, right? To see completely different ones. But yeah, Calgary is going to clearly be the chalk tonight. I think it's pretty obvious there.
Yeah, and one thing that I kind of like to do here, so we're getting 86% in our top 100 here, right? But only 25% in the actual pool, which means we've got more of a diverse pool than the top 100 is kind of letting on. This is a good spot, I think, to experiment sometimes with the min unique players and just start telling Sabersim, hey, each lineup must have 3 unique players different from it, or even more, right? You can get up to like 4 or 5 and just start seeing. The one thing I like to do there, the reason why I like to do that is to basically see, like once you start forcing diversity into your lineups here, what does Sabersim want to sacrifice first, right? Is it, keep the Calgary stacks and rotate the mini stacks around them and the goalie? Or sometimes there's certain slates where you'll see that like as soon as you increase min uniques a little bit, this starts dropping really quickly, right? And that kind of indicates to me that number there is a little fragile there to adding additional diversity into your build. So yeah, I mean, it looks like the Calgary stack's really popping tonight, even at 4 min uniques players, which is pretty high. They're still showing up at 67%.
So look at that. See that first team. So one thing like I said, I handpick a little bit more than just like use the opto and like just export it. But one thing I'll see is if I do feel pretty married to a team like Calgary and I know, hey, they're going to be chalky, I need to make sure it's different. And when I see Aho and I see Wheeler's ownership, like I'm not saying it's like low, but what I'll try to actually naturally force is I will look and see in my pool who is like a low owned player that's popping up, and I'll try and take like that one rule that you said. I kind of just do it by hand. I know you can do it pretty well, but I remove like Aho and Wheeler and see what player at low ownership I can grab, right? So I don't remove them the way you did it. Like I remove them, go to the actual team, click the team.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yes, that's the way. So I'll click out him. I will click out Wheeler just because I think ownership wise, they take up a ton. You could keep Brady in there. I think that's fine and you can go cheaper if you like. Actually take him out because he's 21%. And I'll go and I'll be like, let me grab, go to center or wing, I guess is a good one. I'll like find a naturally low owned center or wing that's expensive, right? Like that's one thing I'll try to do. Center, there's not one there. Go to wing. Maybe like there's a wing that pops up that's kind of low. Oh, let's see. I guess what's his Carter doesn't seem bad. Like 6%. Keep going. Oh, yeah, that option.
There, yeah, okay.
I'll look at his projection and just see, is it good? Is it not? Right. But like I'll toss him in and then maybe they'll look for a correlation piece, like to make these last 2 fill out, to make like a 4-2-1. So like that's one thing I do. What do you think about that? Because that's like a way you're basically, I think, doing what you said, using the unique settings without like using them, right? I feel like I'm actually manually becoming unique in a way. What do you think about that? Is obviously you're more of a Sims guy and don't really dive in as deep to this, but what do you think about this?
Yeah, no, I love it. Right. I mean, and I think that's a great approach. Opening up the lineups, especially if you're playing like, single entry, 3 max, even like 5 lineups thrown into the bigger GPPs or something like that. I think it's a great way. You can use Sabersim to basically build out the core of the lineup, the general construction, and then fill in different players here with this lineup editor. Yeah, no, I love this here. I think it's a great approach.
Yeah, and if you haven't signed up, for Run Pure Sports or Sabersim, you can get Sabersim with it. Use the code MANGONE15, get you 15% off. Obviously this is a great tool that you guys should be using. If you have not used an opto, listen, feel free to dive in. And if you're diving in for the first time, do not dive in at 6 p.m. I'll tell you that right now. Dive in at 3 p.m. Eastern, or let's say today you decide to purchase it. Maybe mess around with it, but if not, go back to your old process for the day so you don't feel too overwhelmed, and mess around with it after a lock, right? I think that's super important to learn the optimizer. Listen, this thing is open 24/7, right? It's not like the coffee shop down the street where it closes at a certain time. You can look at this 24/7 if you want to improve and get better at DFS. So dive into the opto when you get a chance. I know life gets crazy and busy, but it's a great tool that you should be using here over at Run Pure Sports and Sabersim as well. So, yeah, Jordan, it's interesting because, again, there's a lot of Calgary. And, again, I try to avoid the chalky stack. And I remember one slate, but it was more of a shorter slate. It was Tampa Bay, and I had a really good day. And I was going to try and fade Tampa Bay. And then I ended up just saying, why am I doing it? Saber keeps telling me just to play Tampa. So play Tampa, find a way to make it different. Do you have an idea of how we can make maybe the Calgary stacks?
Yeah.
Is there a way to look through these?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a couple options, right? There's a lot of different ways we could do this. I think, let's say you're looking at this here and you're saying, hey, I'm playing 150 lineups. I don't have time to edit each one, right? I want to get these a little less chalky. One thing that I like to do here is I'll actually sort by ownership, and I'll look, what are the chalkiest builds in the entire pool, right? How much ownership are we getting here? 160%, 159%, 151%. And I'll set a lineup filter here to start filtering out some of the chalkier lineups. So I'm going to say in this filter, show lineups where the ownership is less than, let's say 125, just see what that does here, and save that filter. And what that's going to do here, and it only trashes 54 lineups out of the pool, but we can resort by Saber score now, and you'll see basically automatically here, top lineup, still a Calgary stack, right? 3 guys from power play, 1, but we're starting to fill in with some less chalkier pieces here. We're bringing lineups with lower owned guys up to the top now. And you could go a little more out of this, right? One thing I like to do is basically see start small, 125. What's the impact of that on my pool? It only eliminated 54 lineups here. I don't want to go crazy. I don't want to start eliminating, 1,000 lineups from the pool, but maybe we even go a little bit further, 110, and just start seeing kind of what the impact of that is here. And you're going to naturally bring lower owned builds up to the top here. Here's another one, right? Some very lower owned plays in here, a lower owned Detroit stack here. It looks like actually just kind of like a game stack in this build here. Yeah. Now we can look at those team stacks again and see what's happening here, right? It looks like Vegas gets jumped up a little bit here. Carolina, who might be a little chalky as well, but we're starting to fill out here, get some lower owned guys. Goalie in particular, that's something where a lot of times that some of those lower owned goalies start to really jump up here a little bit when you start.
That's one of my favorites. I always jump in the Run Pure chat whenever I play hockey, and I say, this is the low owned goalie I'm on. This is my guy. I know some people don't like to put the goalie in their cores, but I love putting the goalie in the core. Basically, it's a natural way I try to get myself different right away, right? Mm-hmm. I'm just I feel like one thing in DFS that people don't talk enough about is, listen, I love to talk about the plays, right? Everyone wants the plays and the winners, but why not the fades, right? Why not don't you dare play that guy, right? And I'm not saying that you shouldn't play the chalk goalie, but I feel like a good rule of thumb is if you faded the chalk goalie pretty much every slate, I think overall it'd work out well long term. But that's just me. I don't know what you think about that.
I agree. I'm definitely on fade the chalk goalie. A lot of times I'm pretty aggressive with the way I end up handling ownership in NHL. Even if I end up turning the slider down because I don't want to include it so much in the build, I will get pretty aggressive with either the filter or just my player exposures here. Or really, I don't even mind the idea of just experimenting with what happens if we just X Calgary here. That one didn't go through.
So I love trying that, right? And one thing that might do is it might show you there's other contrarian stacks that pop up that are pretty interesting. And it might be one that's completely low owned. Maybe it's a 4-man stack. And then maybe you can mix it with a 3-man Calgary, right? I don't know. You just it's good to just at least gain the information on the slate of, what could happen if for some reason, you just got rid of that stack completely, right? It just helps you see what else is popping up, what other good plays could be there. So, and as I thought, Carolina would probably be number 2. Vegas seems like another contender today to be pretty interesting. One thing I definitely do is I wait until the content's up and I try to read a little bit about some of the small nuances. Is someone on a back-to-back? Maybe home ice. How has a team been? I try to look for recent trends. We have some of that stuff at Run Pure Sports. I know that's less sims and everything like that, but I like to look at it when helping make some decisions with these things. So That helps me a little bit there. But I do think Carolina is popping as that team too. And what that also tells me, Jordan, like I kind of speculated before, do I want to play Calgary and Carolina together? Probably not.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think, I mean, like doing that kind of research can be a great way. A lot of times that does end up giving you a little bit of an ownership edge anyway, just because, other people aren't on some of those same plays. So I was just poking through, looking at some of these lineups here. I mean, just looking at the ownership right off the bat, the complexion of these lineups looks a lot better to me. I kind of like the approach we're taking with here. But, one thing I did want to mention as well, because you had mentioned it, we didn't really do it, but perfectly fine as well to come back here and make some of these adjustments on the home screen and start with a fresh build, right? When we eliminate Calgary in the build, we're dropping off 25% of our pool. And that's fine. I mean, you only need 150 lineups. That's what the pool's there for. It's there for you to make adjustments. But if you wanted to start fresh and just like do something really extreme and just say, hey, like I want to see what a build looks like when I just X the Flames here, you can do that. Knock them off here and start another build. You'll get 1,500 lineups this time, no Calgary stacks. And that might, even float some other teams back up to the top there. You might get a little bit of some different options in your builds that way. So I think that can be a good tool as well.
Yeah, let's run it like that. Give me 100 teams in the like pool that we look at if you could. And then let's look and see if maybe our 5-man and 4-man stack types have changed. Because that's, again, something that I think, and again, Calgary's values are amazing today. Like I can tell by just looking at it, they're you're getting line 1 guys and power play one guys at like 4K, 5K, amazing values for sure. Which I'm okay with eating that chalk a little bit more than the expensive chalk, just because it doesn't take as much to get there, and I can be different up top with other guys like I mentioned before. But yeah, so now we get more 4-3s and 4-2s, which again I think the reason why you're going to get that is because of how many just good Calgary options it seems like they have up in that line 1 and 2 option. You get the Devils, which the Devils have some talented players for sure. At St. Louis, that's another thing I like to look at too. Sometimes, Jordan, is like I typically like to take the home teams if I can, just because home teams are, they get the advantage with picking the lines. That's another little nuance that you got. I dive into our playbook to kind of read about and see if there's any angles there to take. Also, let's say I run everything, and I honestly don't know how good Calgary is this year. But if Calgary, I know Detroit's not a good team, so that's one reason Calgary's going to pop a ton and have a huge team total. But a great example is the Coyotes. Coyotes are not a great hockey team, but one day Coyotes were popping, and I was like, well, why are the Coyotes popping? And I looked a little deeper at it, and I was like, well, they're playing the Red Wings. It was 2 bad teams against each other, and they were at home, which I felt like gave them a little bit more of an advantage than most slates. And they were going to be lower owned because they're just the Coyotes, right? So that's something that I look at as like a little nuance as well. It's like which team's at home, because again, you can have a little bit of an advantage, and sometimes there could be road teams that you're like, wow, this guy's popping, but maybe he's not as good of a play because he could be against a tougher matchup. Where again, if you're like kind of like someone that likes to dig into the numbers and stuff like that, those are ways you can use Sabersim to kind of build out those teams if you'd like.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, like running these builds here a second time can be kind of interesting. I mean, we weren't getting any Devils the first time we ran it, really, or not very many. And now, Winnipeg's also showing up as another team we're getting quite a bit here as well.
I'm a big Winnipeg guy. I'm not a fan of them, but for some reason, like DFS wise, we have our biases or teams that we like, and Winnipeg's one I like. So how do we do this? Let's just show the Winnipeg teams and see what they look like, because I always like looking at their team, and I just think they got really good players. And first team up, that's one of the teams I absolutely love. It's got in line 1, 2 guys, and it's got 2 guys for the line 2, right? And then the power play. I don't know if you still have that rule in. Maybe you still have the rule set, but
no, I don't. So this is like the perfect example, right? This is what the correlation from the Sims is giving you, right? No rules. We made a rule at the start of the show just to show it, but I unchecked it here, right? So we're getting this nice stack where, power play 1 from Winnipeg here, power play 1 from Seattle here as well, and then stacking, chalky goaltender, but defense as well from that team. The lineup just makes sense, right? It just kind of clicks when you look at it here. Yeah. And that's with no rules. So it's really powerful stuff here right out of the gate.
Now, one thing I might do here, and again, like if you think I'm wrong, push back on anything, because again, I have different ideas. When I see someone like Brady, whatever his name is, popping there, I'm like, man, like he's on line, like power play 1 and 2, and like I'm like, if he does well, like so do the other guys in the line, like they might. So like I remove him from this team. Like I manually look for a change personally. What do you think about that? Because that's something that I like to do. if I'm just already staying away from them. Now, if I have a two-man stack already, that's fine. But I don't consider the goalie part of the two-man stack personally.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I don't think the goalie and defenseman are even very highly correlated here as well. So I think I was thinking more of kind of like soccer DFS there, but no, I think that's a great idea. I use that a lot. That same mentality for baseball, right? Like a lot of times I don't like playing the chalky one-off because you're almost in that case you're like hoping it's just that guy and that the rest
ridiculous.
Of the offense doesn't.
Why are we trying to hit that leg of a parlay? That's absurd.
Yeah. So no, I like that a lot. A lot of times, you can come in here and sort or just look and see, if there's a cheaper or a lower owned guy. The projections for a lot of these guys are just like way closer here as well. So
correct. Exactly.
Like we can throw in like Chris Tanev here, skates on line one defenseman here, 3.2% does give us a little bit of that like Flames exposure. We could go to a different team as well.
Yeah, I would go to a completely different team just because you don't like. Now, if I had, let's say like Schwartz was like a Calgary guy, I'd be perfectly fine with that. But if we're already staying away from him, and let's say we like Seattle, I'm not saying I like him, but if we like Seattle, I would plug in someone that's like just in that range, similar projection. And then I roll with it, right? I try to find, hey, like who could be the guy that has a close projection? It looks like he does. And he's on what? He's on Washington line one and power play line one. Also, Another thing I kind of think about when I do that is, well, if he has a big game, am I going to get buried by Ovechkin? No, I think Ovechkin's out. But if Ovechkin was in, likely not having a lot of ownership, like there's a great chance that if he does well, like, and let's say Ovechkin does well, Ovechkin's got to crush because he's so expensive, right? So that's another angle that I'll look at sometimes. Like if I know that they have a really expensive like star on their team, well, my guy can get there, and then the other guy cannot get there because of how expensive he is and what he has to do for your full lineup, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. So I mean, I just plugged him in here. I saved the lineup. One thing just to note here, so when you do edit a lineup, we'll go ahead and just lock that into your pool here. So it gives it that lock thing. So if we did end up, let's say we were looking through 100 lineups, but our goal is to just play a single entry. If we just now narrow this back down to one, it's going to be that lineup we edited here that pops up as the one because it's locked into the pool. So kind of nifty. You can build 1,500. You can look at the top 100, go through, find one you like, edit it. It's locked in, set it to one. You got your single entry bullet for the night. So
and then when you lock it, like, is there a way like to take locked lineups and like export to CSV? I guess show the people that. Is it all just under locked or is it just under lineups?
So this is our lineup set here now. Yeah. So just under lineups, we're good to go. So you could download the lineup CSV here. Download lineups. The ideal case here, actually, you know what? Let's go ahead and I'm gonna register for a bullet here real quick so I can show the entry editor process because I think that's pretty cool. Yeah, I don't have an entries file yet, but
it's good for people to see that. And it's if you don't see it, it's overwhelming for sure. I mean, I've been really diving into MME a lot more, and there's some stuff I've been doing. I'm just like, this is overwhelming. And I did 150 in NBA, and I was like, Jesus, this is so much. I'm not used to this, but this is helpful stuff to be able to see and understand and have someone show you kind of like how it works.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm reserved here now. So I reserved that entry. And now all I'm going to do, this is by far the best way to get this lineup into your contest, whether you're playing 1, 20, 150, whatever. So we'll click fill entries here. Now it's going to say, okay, we need an entries file. So I'm already reserved. Download template file from DraftKings. Go straight to my computer up here, drag and drop. And there's the entry, right? So in this case, single entry, might be just as easy to actually just enter this lineup into DraftKings. But even if you're talking about 3 or 5 lineups, it gets pretty tedious pretty fast, right? So all we're going to do here now, we've got our lineup set, fill all entries to make sure that lineup gets in there, and then download entries. And actually, you know what? I'll show you the easier way. I'm going to do download and open DraftKings, which is going to download the file, take me right to the right page on DK. And nice. Now
that is way easier.
Yeah, it's super easy. AP and I had the same thing, I think, a couple shows ago here where I showed him this and he was like, oh, I got to start doing that. But the more lineups, the more easier it gets, right? I think this is a good example of what you were saying before, right? Try Sabersim out earlier in the day, not when you're under the time crunch. People get a little bit scared with the CSV stuff, editing lineups, that kind of stuff. I know it's scary, easy to make a mistake. If you've been doing it one way for a long time, you don't want to switch that up. Take some time, like 5 hours before lock one day. Register for your contests. Build some dummy lineups, go through the entry editor process, get it once, get what it feels like. Once you've practiced it once and you're not under a time crunch, you won't do it the old way ever again. It's just that much easier. So definitely a good thing to practice and try it out.
Yeah, I did. I forget. It was probably like 3 weeks ago or so, but I remember uploading once, and like, typically when you upload, if you got it in like the $15 and the $4, like, and when you copy and paste it in, because I do it a different way. I don't do it that way, but when I copy and paste it in, I click save, I put it up there, and I didn't see it. Typically should say two, 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 like every team in two. I saw like four, four, and I was like, oh, and it was like 56 on the clock, and I was panicking. I was like, this is so bad. And it ended up not being a disaster. But again, there can be small, minor difficulties from doing it. But I think in the long run, when you do anything in life, right, you're going to have some issues. You're going to have some problems, but you're going to come out greater on the other side, right? You're going to come out stronger, better player. So I do think overall, this is a great process that, you should be using. I think using an opto is very important for sure when playing DFS, especially while everyone else is out here, using it as well, right? You're putting yourself at a disadvantage, in my opinion. So use the code MANGONE15 to get you 15% off. So you can get Rumpier Sports, you can get Sabersim as well. And also like that video if you guys could, and subscribe to the channel to check out all the great content that we have. We'll have a free NBA show today, and we're going to have tons of content for you over the break. So you do not want to miss out on that during the NBA All-Star break. Jordan, what else do you want to show here on the NHL side via Sabersim?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think we've done a pretty good job covering a lot of it here. One other thing I did want to touch on is, let's say you're watching the NHL show, reading some of the Run Pure content, and there's an angle on a team, right, that you want to get some additional exposure to a team that you're just not seeing in your initial build. I think these team totals can be pretty interesting to adjust. Or actually, you know what, let's take the Flames example again. Let's say we don't want to fully fade them, but we don't want 80%. We're getting a little too much in our build. We want to knock them down a little bit. I like the team totals for that. And the reason why I like adjusting the team totals is because that's going to have a nice like correlated effect on your player projections for these guys. You don't have to worry about how am I going to adjust like 30 skaters for this team accordingly based on what I actually think the implied team total is. We're going to handle that for you going into the Sims. Making these adjustments for each guy here. You can see they're all in red. They've all been knocked down. You can go a little further too, right? Whatever feels right based on, making the adjustment, looking at the projections, running some builds here. But, you can do that with a leverage spot as well, right? Maybe a lot of times I like to do that for some of these like lower projected teams, maybe take a shot on a team here. I haven't followed hockey in a little while, but I know I was playing a little bit more last year. Montreal was a team that just shot a ton. Maybe you want to play an angle here where they have a little bit of a better offensive game here. So you could bump them up, give them a little bit boost, start seeing them in a little bit more of your builds. I like that too, because that's direct leverage off like the super chalk goalie here as well. So the team totals can be pretty useful for making those kinds of adjustments.
Yep. Yeah, I definitely don't mind that. Also, another thing I'll do sometimes is like Carolina, like sometimes like Carolina is apparently chalky. They're not like the chalk stack, but like Carolina's the chalk stack, and like the goalie is like sometimes, like I said before, I'll just like X the goalie completely just because like I don't want him to win anyways. Because you know what? If he wins, they scored goals. Like, and that's not good for me. Like, could they win 1-0 or 2-0? Yes, they could. Certainly. But that is one thing that, again, I kind of like to think through, kind of like stuff that you're talking about there when it comes to, it's like a weird, it's not leverage, but it's a weird way to just like be betting on, I'm already betting on Calgary to fail, or not Calgary, Carolina to fail. So why don't I just bet on the whole situation, right? It just makes sense, especially if you can find someone with a similar projection in that range. So that's another thing that I'll look at. And on the flip side, let's say you got a lean of like, I don't know, let's say you think there's like a road team. Typically, this is not a bad way to do it. If the team's on the road, right? Let's say Florida was like the chalk offense of the day, right? Why not bet on their goalie, right? And like, if for some reason he holds him to one goal, you could really gain a ton of leverage there in that way. And now it's a totally different way to approach it. I don't think it fits for every slate. I think it's very situational. But what's your thoughts on that? Taking basically the chalk offense, especially if it's a slate where it's not a great slate overall, taking that chalk offense and then just taking the goalie on the other side.
Yeah, I like that. Any of these sports where, you have like wide ranges of outcomes and clear negative correlation spots. I like to do that kind of stuff, right? Where you're basically saying, what's my strongest fade on the slate? What's my strongest lean? And then how can you actually get a little bit more leverage when that guy fails? Stacking the opposing offense against the chalky goalie that you're fading, or vice versa, maybe a little extra exposure to a goalie against the chalk offense you're fading, right? Goalies in NHL are kind of interesting because they, if they see like 18 shots, 18 saves, give up no goals, a lot of times that's actually not even enough upside for you to win a tournament just because they're not going to put enough points up. So you kind of need a team that's going to put a lot of shots on the goalie, rack up 45 saves or something like that, even if they give up a goal or two. And that's actually the upside you're looking for. So sometimes, situations, even you take a bad goalie against a good offense, right? Getting a little bit exposure to that guy and just hoping that they see a ton of shots and they just, rack up a ton of saves that night. A lot of times that's the way to go with the goalies there. So definitely like doing stuff like that.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And like I said, Sabersim, the correlation tool that it has, similar to baseball, where this opto was built for baseball, it definitely helps give you some really interesting looks. And like I said, dive in and look at the different teams. I mean, one thing I'll look at is I'll hand go through every single team. Like, let's say, Jordan, go back to one of the runs. That's perfectly fine. That one's probably good. We'll go to the Devils one, right? Let's,
yeah, here, I'll open this back up.
Yeah, open this back up. Go to 4-man stacks, actually, just 4-mans. And then click the Devils 4-mans. Because I typically like 4-mans the most. And I'll dive in and look at them all and be like, hey, how do these look, right? And see, maybe there's a correlation of a certain mini stack that fits it pretty well. And one thing I noticed correlation-wise is I already see a ton of Boston being popped in there. And let me tell you, a Devils Boston stack, that is going to be unowned today. It's not going to be a stack that people are going to together. And sometimes the reason I like to look at that is I like to see how the pieces fit together. Maybe I'll look at a stack and I'll be like, this is a good stack, but then it's always paired with Calgary. And I'll be like, I'm already trying to avoid them today. Maybe I don't want to go about that route. Or maybe it's always paired with Calgary and it's low owned enough. And I'm like, I should just eat this chalk and it's good chalk. And that's why it's pumping it in through all these teams. So these are little nuances that I look at when kind of trying to handpick my teams.
Yeah, and I mean, you can even take the filters one step further here, right? So what I did, I increased number of lineups here to 1,500 just to see the entire pool. And then, so we're filtering by New Jersey 4 stacks. We can go look at all the 4 threes here now and see what are the team pairings we're getting with just New Jersey 4 stacks. So, you want to take a look at some of the Boston stacks, you can do that. You can see, sometimes you'll do this and you'll see 100% of my New Jersey stacks are all paired with some other team, right? So it can be useful to see that or compare. This is one where we're pretty spread out, right? So you can go through, kind of look and see the exposure complexion there. So the filters are pretty useful, I think, especially, playing just a handful of lineups a night. There's a lot of power you can really unlock here messing around with these.
Yeah, and again, you're handpicking teams, right? It's again, I'm not trying to convince the opto guys over. I'm trying to convince the hand builders if they're still around, right? I don't think the dinosaurs, I don't think they're dead yet, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's definitely a good way to go about it and break it all down, help people out because, again, it can feel very overwhelming, but if you use it in a way to use your hey, I like to have some control over it. Well, listen, I think you got to take some control off everything. I think we all as humans just like control and we like reasons for doing things, but I just want to get people to start using it because I think the opto is so, so important. Tanner said the Flames are good, but they're not -280 favorites. So, yeah, I mean, we'll see. We got the hockey guys in chat. They're talking about all the, hand in the dirt kind of takes, or I don't know what the NHL version of that is. Hand in the gloves. I don't know. Hand on the puck. I'm not sure, but I do think it's very interesting. And on the flip side, maybe Calgary is a great stack and maybe you just overstack it with 5-mans like it was showing before. There's different ways to go about this, different ways to attack the chalk, different ways to attack some of the contrarian plays. Jordan, do you got anything else or should we close this thing out?
No, I was just going to add on, to your point. I think we get a reputation at Sabersim that it's for MME or that, if you're playing just a couple lineups a night or you're used to hand building it, you're not going to get any value out of it. And I just don't think that's the case, right? I mean, let's say that you're hand building a couple lineups a night. You know that you're playing a Devils stack. You know you're playing a Devils 4 stack. You know that you want a 4-3, right? How long would it take you to build 19 different options of that with different other stacks, different goalies, different one-offs in there? To even just look through and see what you ultimately wanted to play, right? I mean, it take a while. We can do this in just a couple seconds. And these lineups are correlated. You know that the Sims like these lineups here. You get all these options. And if you weren't even that specific with what you wanted to do, you've got even more at your disposal here. So I think it's really powerful. Every time, Mangone, you and I talk, I always like that kind of component of it because I know that a lot of times you're playing, the 3-max streets, that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of value here, even if you're playing some of the smaller entry limit kind of hand-built type stuff. In terms of getting good lineups out there. So
yeah, there's so much value in it. And Jordan, I'll admit, sometimes NBA slates, they can run wild, right? And sometimes they get a little wild and I start to get in a hand build mode. And You know what? There was one slate recently that I hand built way more than I normally do. And I looked at my two teams, Jordan, and I think it was because the reason I hand built was because I was going to the Nuggets game, right? I built some stuff earlier, but I backloaded and then it forced me to hand build. And I looked at my two teams and I got like a 2v2 of like two crappy basketball players, like just 4K guys. And I'm like, what am I doing here? I don't have any diversification here at all. And yeah, if it hits, it's great. But I do think it's important to find the happy medium of having really good core and staying with that, but also not shooting yourself in the foot completely, right? Like I think trying to find that happy medium is important. I know it's something Big T talked about a little bit in Showdown. It's one of his strengths, but I also think your strength, it can be your weakness at times. And I think he does a great job of narrowing down his core way better than me. But at times it can hurt him, times it can help him, but he wants to find that happy medium. And I think I'm like that too. I want to find that happy medium to get better at that as well, because I think sometimes I try to spread it out a little bit too much. And I think I've gotten better at that too. So a lot of great ways to use this. Like I said, there could be MME guys watching right now that'd be like, this MANGONE guy's a donkey for the way he's talking about it and like the way you are. And some of the handle guys might like the way, but there's so many ways to skin a cat, and just trying to show the ways that can be helpful for the hand builders and MMEers too, right? You can just kind of run the stuff the way you want, put some of the rules on that Jordan talked about, up maybe, up or down like the Calgary team total to get less of them, but you're still getting some exposure, and then just roll with it, export it, and call it a day. And just like, not even watch, go to sleep and wake up the next day and see kind of what happens.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. And don't forget, Sabersim channel in the Run Pure Discord. Our guys are monitoring that like basically all day. If you have questions, trying NHL out for the first time, not sure how to do something, something's not working the way you expected, just give us a shout in that channel and we'd be happy to help out.
Yep. And if you want more Sabersim videos, right, we have a ton on here. Jordan has a ton on the Sabersim YouTube channel. So if you want access to them, we got them over here at Run Pure Sports. And if there's something specific, I'll say this. If you're in the Run Pure Sports Discord and you say, hey, Jordan, I'm looking for an NBA specific video, maybe more of 150 max, I bet you Jordan can find you like the right video.
I certainly can.
Yeah. So like, or if he's like, let's say like NASCAR, right? The big NASCAR thing is coming up here on Sunday. Jordan could probably find you a video that's NASCAR based that is, can help you with that. So be sure to check all that out on the YouTube channels. They're free and we'll be able to help you out. But again, if you want to sign up for Run Pure Sports and get some Sabersim in your life, use that code MANGONE15, get you 15% off. Jordan, I guess not much else to say. Any final thoughts here before we get on out of here?
No, that was a good one. It always goes super fast. Hour flies by. So no, I'm excited. I got my single bullet here in for tonight. I like the direction we were going with that lineup, so I might end up doing something kind of close to that. I don't want these guys watching along to dupe me here, so I'm gonna have to shake it up a little bit. But I like the strategy we had here for that build.
Yeah, no, I definitely liked it too. I'll run some stuff a little later for sure. I'll have a core for NHL up tonight. I'll have my NBA stuff as well, and I'll be on that free show at 4:45. So be sure to tune in to that. Should be a good time. We'll be breaking it all down for you here over at Run Pure Sports. But for me, MANGONE and Jordan, we will see you guys later.